Because you guys loved my random facts in the last episode, we're going to do two more random facts. First one, did you know that wind turbines kill between 10,000 and 100,000 birds each year in the UK? Interesting enough, painting one of the blades black can reduce birds' death by 70%. And for all those people who love eating bananas, guess what? Bananas are radioactive. Let me explain a little more. Bananas are radioactive due to being rich in potassium. Every banana is actually slightly radioactive thanks to containing the natural isotope potassium 40. Interesting enough, your body contains around 16 mag of potassium 40, meaning that you're around 280 times more radioactive than the banana already. Your excess potassium 40 you gain from a banana is pooped out within a few hours. So, as promised, tonight, because it's night right now in Arizona, we're going to talk about two topics in a sense, or two stories, I would say. One of them, we're going to talk about the IVF law that Alabama passed about a week ago. And then we're going to talk about Nikki Haley's campaign. And then, because I've been gone for so long, it wouldn't be the last conversation without talking about something that's affecting a lot of us, especially us millennials, some of us older in our 30s, about wanting to buy a house. We're all trying to live that American dream of have a house, have a white picket fence, have a dog, have a wife or husband or whatever, and some kids. Well, to be honest, the American dream is not really the American dream anymore. Right now, it's called the struggle bus. We're going to talk about all three of those in just a few minutes, right here on the last conversation. Don't go anywhere. So, if you've been living under a rock for a while, you may not have heard of Alabama passing a new law on IVF treatments. For all of those who do not know what an IVF treatment is, it's a introverted way for moms to become pregnant. Sometimes it's hard to get pregnant the natural way, right? And so IVF is another way of doing that pregnancy because they take I would say they take the fluids essentially and they take them out of the body. So the dad's sperm, the mom's egg, and they do it inside of a lab instead to kind of make the process a little bit easier. Because sometimes dad could have slow swimmers, right? Sometimes mom's eggs may not be working. I don't know. There's millions of reasons why people do IVF. Surrogacy is another reason why people do IVF. But strictly in this story, Alabama is now restricting it because the fear is that if they restrict IVF, then that means parents literally do not have a choice in how they become parents, right? So let's go into this story about it so you understand why IVF is so important, especially for those who have troubles of getting pregnant. And this affects all races. It's not just a white thing. It's, blacks, Asians, every demographic. Most people will have trouble with fertilization the normal way. And you know how that is if you went to health class. And IVF is another alternative, which usually gives parents a lot more hope. Anyway, let's keep going. So, providers in Alabama are resuming some in vitro fertilization services this past Thursday, the day after the state's Republican governor signed a bill into law aimed at protecting IVF patients and providers from the legal liability imposed on them by the Supreme Court's ruling. The new law does not address the issue of parenthood at the heart of the last month's unprecedented ruling, which prompts some providers to halt some IVF services, and experts say it's going to take more work to fully protect fertility services in that state. The Alabama Supreme Court ruled last month that frozen embryos are human beings, and those who destroy them can be held liable for wrongful deaths. 3 of the state's limited pool of IVF providers immediately paused services, sending some families out of the state to access treatment and prompting a widespread and urgent demand for lawmakers to provide a fix. Again, that is frozen embryos are human beings, and those who destroy them would be held liable for wrongful death. There could be reasons why they destroy frozen eggs. Person could have passed away and now they don't need. The new law, which passed in the majority of the Republican Alabama House and Senate late Wednesday, before Governor Kay Ivey signed it into law, aims to provide civil and criminal immunity for providers and patients for the destruction or damage to embryos. The legislation will apply retroactively. Under the new law, manufacturers of goods used to facilitate the in vitro process or transport or stored embryos also are provided with criminal immunity. Which 2 of the 3 providers who halted IVF services are resuming those treatments? The third, the clinic at the center of the state Supreme Court case, told CNN that the new law falls short of providing legal protections it needs to resume care. Gabby Price, who uprooted her life and career in order to afford IVF, told CNN on Thursday she was relieved the new law passed but called the law a band-aid. She goes on to say, I do feel like there's a lot that needs to be addressed still, and I think a lot of the other people feel that way as well. But with IVF being such a time-sensitive procedure, there are so many families that can't wait, Price said. We had to get something in place for those families that couldn't wait. Still, the law does not nullify the Supreme Court's analysis that said the law ought to treat embryos like people. Catherine Kutchel, a assistant professor at Northwestern University's School of Law, told CNN on Tuesday. Experts have expressed concern that while the Republican-backed law protects providers from liability when it comes to the destruction of embryos, it could also insulate them from standard medical malpractice claims. The Alabama House Democrat caucus said the new law is short-sighted and does not adequately address the many legal questions of embryonic personhood, nor the seriousness of consequences of the unprecedented and dangerous Alabama Supreme Court rule. It's a lot to digest there. Let me finish. Simply put, this law is not a solution. Its statement reads, it serves only to avoid a reckoning at the cost of the extending and complications of Alabama Supreme Court ruling. State Senator Larry Suits, a Republican and lone lawmaker who voted against the measure in the state Senate, criticized the language of the bill, arguing it is not an IVF protection bill, it is an IVF provider and supplier protection bill. That is limiting the ability of mothers that are involved in IVF to have recourse. Essentially, it's the Supreme Court saying that they're still human beings, right? So this protects the facilities that do that because, as I said, sometimes you just can't hold on to them, right? These, even though they're frozen, they still have, I don't want to use the word, but it's like an expiration date, right? They can only be frozen for so long. And like I said, there's other situations. Maybe the person dies. Maybe they don't want them anymore, and they don't want their egg going somewhere else. So this is kind of like a protection. But if the Supreme Court keeps going the way that they're going to say, well, these are human beings. Essentially, embryos are human beings, and you can't destroy them under any law, and it would be criminal. So this is kind of like as they said, it's a band-aid. But we'll see where this goes because this could also be chopped up all the way to the Supreme Court. Now we have another almost Roe v. Wade situation. So carrying on, U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth, a Democrat who proposed a national IVF protection bill that was blocked last week, was also critical of the new law. She goes on to say, I'm disappointed that Republican state legislators in Alabama refused to work in a bipartisan way to pass a real solution to this Republican-created crisis that makes it clear An embryo is not a human being, Duckworth told CNN in a statement on Thursday. Alabama State Rep. Terry Collins and Senator Tim Melson, Republicans who introduced the state law, have noted that it was intended to provide immediate relief for families who have lost access to IV services, while officials consider more permanent solutions. They go on to say that this addresses the immediate problem, and that is what I am trying to do today. We need to have a longer decision or discussion. Yes, we do, Collins said last week. They go on to say, well, Melson said this is a temporary fix. This gets the ladies now currently in the situation that are in limbo back to the clinic. Ively similarly acknowledged that the new law was a quick fix after the court ruling, and noted there's still more work to come for IVF protections. She goes on to say that I am pleased to sign this important short-term measure into law so that couples in Alabama hoping and praying to be parents can grow their family through IVF. IVF is a complex issue, no doubt, and I anticipate there will be more work to come, but right now I am confident that this law will provide the reinsurances to our IVF clinics need and will lead them to insure services immediately. Going on, IVF patients express cautious relief. Price cited concerns that the broad immunity meant to protect providers from liability could leave patients without regulations need to keep them safe from possible medical malpractice. It goes on to say that it does make it a little nervous, and it does make me wonder if it's going to be harder for those fighting for their regulations to get to them. Elizabeth Goldman felt that she's been living in limbo as her IVF treatments were halted. The uterus transplant recipient who sold her home, moved to Birmingham to start a family, said she was thankful to lawmakers for coming together quickly and helping clinics reopen. She goes on to say that this has been extremely stressful and scary, these 2.5 weeks waiting in limbo while my IVF clinic was shut down. Goldman told CNN saying that she watched every step of the laws passing and now feels hopeful her journey can continue after the clinics reopen. Gabriel invested more than $20,000 into an IVF treatment in Alabama before her clinic halted IVF services, and she and her husband had to leave the state to continue treatment. She said the news of the new law left her and her husband in tears. Although it doesn't take away from all the hurt and craziness we felt, it feels like we are finally seeing change and we feel supported. I feel immense relief and hope. I've never been in that type of situation, but I feel to be for a service like IVF to be the target or on the chopping block for another Republican state to take access away or mitigate it some other way is it's heartbreak. You know, we see some of these laws and we're like, oh, well, they don't concern us. But then when they truly do start to concern us, that's when we're starting to pay more attention, right? Abortion, no one really paid attention to it, about 10 years ago. But then since it became on the chopping block and the Supreme Court cut it down and returned it to the states, it's more passion, right? It's more, hey, this is a right. This is constitutional right. But now states are just so IVF. I said they move from one thing to another, and IVF is on the chopping. I wouldn't say it's on the chopping block, but I would definitely say that we should watch and see what they do. One of the clinics that halted IVF treatment after the state's court decision, Alabama Fertility in Birmingham, planned to resume services this past Thursday. The clinic canceled at least 35 frozen embryo transfers in which a fertilized egg is implanted into a uterus in less than 2 weeks after pausing treatment. The practice already has an embryo transfer slate for Thursday afternoon, according to their doctor. The doctor says, we cannot wait to celebrate with our patients. Honestly, we can't wait to do the first embryo transfer. We can't wait to see the first positive pregnancy test. It holds even more meaning than it did before. McLean joined families and other IVF associates at the Alabama State House last week to call for immediate restoration, I should say, of services as lawmakers inside rush to push through a law that would protect them. We appreciate the efforts from the lawmakers to push through a bill that meets the needs of all stakeholders involved in IVF treatments in Alabama. We are grateful that they have heard our voices, and we are proud of our patients who have barely shared their stories and are so impressed with the advocacy effort on behalf of infertility patients. The state's largest healthcare system, University of Alabama at Birmingham, also announced it would restart IVF services that were paused after the state Supreme Court. UAB appreciates the Alabama legislature and Governor Ivey for swiftly passing and signing a law that provides some protections and will therefore allow UBA to restart its in vitro fertilization treatment, also known as IVF, said Dr. Warner, chair of the UAB Department of all the other stuff. While UAB is moving to promptly resume IVF treatments, we will continue to assess the developments and advocates for protections for IVF patients and our providers. They go on to say that as we understand the language of the proposed law, as it stands, we are not reopening. Hold on, sorry. Total different people. The defendants of the state Supreme Court, the Center for Reproductive Medicine at Mobile Infirmary, will not be yet resuming IVF services, according to a statement that they said. As we understand the language of the proposed law as it stands, we are not reopening our IVF facility until we have legal clarifications on the extent of immunity provided by the new law, Alabama's law. At this time, we believe the law falls short of addressing the fertilization eggs currently stored across the state and leaves challenges for physicians and fertility clinics trying to help preserve or help deserving families have children of their own. The American Society of Reproductive Medicine released a statement last week warning that without law to address the issue of whether a fertilized egg is legally considered a person, IVF providers are still vulnerable. We believe these bills will not provide the assurances Alabama's fertility physicians need to be confident that they can continue to provide the best standard of care to their patients without putting themselves, their colleagues, and their patients at legal risk. Welcome to IVF. And these are some of the states that have introduced, I'm going to read it here. It says, bills attempting to establish the same legal protections for fertilized egg as a born person, also known as a fetal personhood bills, have been introduced in 15 states. 4 states already have fetal personhood laws on the books. Arizona law is temporarily blocked by a federal judge. Arizona's on there. Utah has introduced a bill. Colorado has introduced a bill. Kansas has introduced a bill. Oklahoma has introduced a bill. Alabama already has a personhood law. Georgia already has a personhood law. Florida has an introduced bill. South Carolina has introduced bill. New York has an introduced bill. Illinois also has an introduced bill as well. So I want you to share your comments or share your thoughts in the comments, whether I post this on YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok, and let me know, do you believe, here's the question, do you believe that a fertilized egg as a born person? Answer that. Do you think so? Fertilized egg, sperm, egg, fertilized. Now it's frozen or whatever. You think that that's a person? We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere because we're going to talk about Nikki Haley. As much as you want to say about Nikki Haley, I have to say that she put up a really good. I mean, she brought in people from both spectrums, Democrat, Republican, Independent, undecided. She did her thing, I have to say. And I've said this before that if she actually won the Republican nominee, it would have been kind of hard to vote between her and Biden because I don't know. She ran a campaign that was good. Okay. It was a very good blah, blah, blah. Start this over. She ran a very good campaign. And I believe that once Joe Biden and Trump shout their vote again, once their 4 years, whoever wins, once their 4 years is up, I definitely think that she's going to come back as a Republican candidate, and she actually might. She might have. But a lot of people were like, well, when is she going to drop out? And she dropped out after Super Tuesday, which it was very evident that she was not going to win the delegates she needed to become Republican. So let's go into story. Since the night of the New Hampshire primary, Nikki Haley has faced one consistent question. When would she drop out? It came from GOP leaders who called on her to suspend her campaign as former President Donald Trump racked up in more wins, and from political observers who assumed she would rather leave the race and face a potential embarrassing defeat in her home state of South Carolina. But for weeks, Haley made clear publicly and privately that the make or break point of her campaign would come on Super Tuesday when GOP primary voters are more than a dozen states, including delegate-rich California and Texas. Yeah. When they did, the answer was very clear. I mean, I watched Super Tuesday at the hotel that I was staying at, and it was sad. It was literally like he was sweeping the floor with her. I will say that she did win Washington and she won Vermont. But Texas, she needed to win Texas to even become like a challenge. California, she needed, like, there were some vital states that she needed to win in order to even stay as a competitor. But she didn't. Texas, all Trump. California, all of it. Like, it was just sweet. Trump won nearly every contest that night, except for Vermont, where Nikki Haley prevailed. They go on to say that I said I wanted Americans to have their voices heard. Haley said hours later as she suspended her campaign Wednesday morning, I have done that. I have no regrets. As I've said, Nikki Haley gave those people who wanted a voice a voice. I don't know how she did it, but it was like, especially for those who didn't want to see another matchup between Biden and Trump, right? And she was given the answers that people wanted. It was more of like she was that bipartisan president, which I feel that we desperately need at this point. We need a bipartisan president that sees the wrongs in both parties, not just, oh, well, Democrats are blah, 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 blah. Oh, well, Republicans are blah, blah, blah. We need someone who's going to be like, they're at fault, they're at fault. This is why we have the issue that, and as president, I would do X, Y, and Z, right? Nikki Haley was that candidate, right? DeSantis wasn't, because he was like, well, Democrats did this, they're to this, they're to that. Tim Scott was like, Democrats did this and did that. Nikki Haley, for me, in my personal opinion, I felt like she was the only person who was in the middle who was like, this is what we did under Trump. This is what we did under Biden. This is how I'm going to correct. This is how I'm going to fix it. So I like that about it. It goes on to say that Haley has been the first of Trump's challengers to launch her campaign and became the last to suspend it. Nearly 13 months of campaigning had to come to an end, with Haley becoming the first woman to win a GOP primary contest, but also with Trump still sailing toward his third straight presidential nomination in a row. For now, Haley faces a new question. Will she endorse Trump? On Wednesday, she did not, instead calling on former presidents to practice the politics of addition and earn the vote of those who did not back him. Her goal is to open up a conversation about issues within the Republican Party and push the party toward unity. One thing that a lot of people had spectated was that she was going to drop out and that she was going to endorse, because I don't know if I've said this in previous episodes, but before they were on the debate, they had to sign a pledge. That pledge said, if you what did that pledge say? It said that you would support the Republican nominee. That was the only way that you could get your foot on the debate stage. In her speech that she gave, she said, "Yeah, I did it at that time to get on the stage, right? Who wouldn't? If you want to get on the stage and, you know, debate, you're going to say whatever you have to say." And I totally agree. Say whatever the hell you have to say. And then when everyone else dropped out and she was on her own, you can change your entire mind. Debates are over. Trump ain't going to debate you. He didn't come to any of the other debates. And I don't think that she's going to endorse Trump. I think that she's going to stay where she is, and I think that she might vote for him privately, but I don't think she's just going to come out and be like, "Yeah, I'm going to endorse." Now, Tim Scott, that little, I got words. He's been kissing Trump's feet and licking them ever since he suspended his campaign. But that's a whole different story. Anyways, I don't think that she's going to endorse him. I think she might vote privately for him, but endorsing, she said he's going to have to earn. That's Anyways, going back, it says her goal is to open up a conversation. Yeah, we already read that. In the days leading up to her decision to suspend her bid, her campaign received a significant amount of feedback on the subject of endorsing Trump or not, sources told CNN. People who are close with Haley have different opinions. Some believe that it would be good for her to back Trump because she would be viewed as a team player. Others oppose her endorsing him because that would give Haley the freedom to be critical of Trump and build her own movement. One of those voices told CNN that they believe that Haley's remarks on Wednesday were too forgiving of Trump, particularly when she expressed her hope that Trump will be successful in earning the vote of her supporters. The two separate camps have shared those opinions with Haley in her campaign in recent days and weeks, sources said. Haley herself has recently said that she is not focused on endorsing anyone because she is focused on winning herself. She has also pointed to her support, which reached 30 to 40% in a handful of states, as a sign of Trump's weakness. According to a CNN exit polls in New Hampshire, South Carolina, Virginia, North Carolina, and California, only 19% of Haley's supporters said they would be satisfied with Trump as the nominee. 79% said they would be dissatisfied. In my personal opinion, as a political science major, I'm kidding. I don't think she should endorse him. I think that she is correct, that this is her time to build base and to build those supporters. Because those supporters could be like, well, then you did all this for nothing if you're just going to endorse him. So that means all the things that you said about him, you're just going to go with it, right? So I believe that she should go ahead and not endorse him, build up her own base, because he had posted on his True Social that he didn't want any of the Nikki Haley supporters. And Biden was like, well, I'll take it. Boom, there you go. But she's going to be bad. I definitely think that she should build up her own campaign, build up her own platform. When Trump's gone, they'll be hurt. Oh. Anyways, moving on. So Kimberly Rice, a former New Hampshire representative who served as a co-chair for Haley's campaign in the Granite State, said that she was one of Haley's voters. She referred to the former president's statement that Haley's donors would be barred permanently from the MAGA world, a move she said she and others took seriously and personally. It's one thing to attack fellow candidates, especially on policy issues, she said. But when you go as far for the jugular and go on personal issues, then you attack the supporters like that. I don't think you have to swallow a little humble pie and try to work on bringing them in. Some top officials on Haley's campaign told major donors in recent weeks that Super Tuesday would dictate whether or not Haley stayed in the race, according to two sources. They made a persuasive case in these private conversations, saying that the race through Super Tuesday would give Haley's team more data about the GOP elaborate, and sources said Haley's team wanted the data before making the call to suspend her campaign, instead of pulling the plug only after a few states had voted. The benchmark for success was 40% of the vote. Building on her previous performance in the early states, Haley ultimately hit that target in just two of the states that voted on Tuesday, Utah and Vermont. As a result, most donors are not surprised by Haley's decision to drop out on Wednesday, particularly because they didn't expect the outcome in the Super Tuesday states to be better than Haley previously performed. Someone went on to say that she made the right decision and she ran a good race. One of the donors said it was an impressive and smart approach to challenging Trump. Haley herself engaged in outreach to some top donors very late Tuesday night. Members of Haley's team also reached out to top donors to say that she was dropping out. It's too early to tell where the donors will go from here. As Haley rose in the polls last fall, she gained the backing of several wealthy donors eager to boost a promising alternative to Trump. That support was born a both benefit and burden, as her Republican opponent, including Governor Ron DeSantis, argued that she was beholden to her donors. Haley countered her rivals were jealous they weren't getting that support. Americans for Prosperity, the political network associated with billionaire Charles Koch, endorsed Haley last November, aided her until the day after South Carolina, when the group said it would stop spending money. Haley is not just going to go away. She's still going to be there. In the weeks between January 23rd, New Hampshire primary, and February 24th, South Carolina, when questions rose about how long her campaign would last, Haley began investing time and money in Super Tuesday states to help quell the rumors she might drop out. I'm not going anywhere, Haley told supporters at an event in California early in February. I'm willing to take the bruises. I'm willing to do the fight and go through the pain. All I'm asking is that you stand there with me. Haley held more than a dozen events in Super Tuesday, including Texas, Massachusetts, Virginia. Overall, Haley's net worth spent about $82 million on ads, with about $17.9 million coming from her campaign, $64.4 million from the SFA fund, the lead super PAC supporting her bid. In addition, Americans for Prosperity Action, Koch-aligned super PAC backing Haley, spent about $8 million on ads supporting her. Damn! I'm sorry, that was probably, that's a lot of money to be spending. Like, wow, like, I mean, if I ever ran for president, like, dude, like, that is 64 million, 82 million in ads, 17.9 million coming from her campaign. Running for president is not cheap. Probably legislature is probably the same. I'll look it up. But that spending shifted in her final weeks of the race. Haley did not make new investments in television advertisements, a decision that was far from unanimous among some of her top supporters and donors who believe that she could have made a stronger run against Trump in suburban areas in North Carolina, Virginia, Texas, and beyond. It's unclear how much money Haley will close her candidacy with, but the candidate who has reminded supporters at virtually every campaign to stop that she is an accountant by trade, was intentionally focused on not going into debt and spending more than her chances warranted. As an advisor said, she can also reserve any of her finances for future political endeavors should she have a future in the Trump-controlled Republican Party. Haley won't just go away. Cannon Dawson, a longtime Haley ally and former chair of the South Carolina Republican Party. This is not the last you've seen of Nikki Haley, he said. She will know who her friends are, and I promise, remember who was against her efforts in this endeavor. Wow. Let's give Haley a round of applause. Like she did her best. I definitely think she spent all that money on advertisements that she should have definitely been spending more before Super Tuesday, even on Super Tuesday, like before people were even hitting the polls. Hey, before you go ahead and look at this ad for Nikki Haley. Like I said, I think that she ran an amazing campaign. I think that she pulled in people from the left, people from the right, people from the middle, because she had that type of campaign. She understood that both parties were at fault of how the country is currently, and that she was truly giving people a voice. I think if Trump wasn't involved, I definitely think that she would have probably did a lot better, but because Trump and his cult people are so heavily on him being president again, they just overtook the stage. And even if, Trump loses this presidential, he's still going to have significant hold over the Republican Party, which is going to make it even extremely hard for any other person to really take that stage away from him, because essentially they're going to look to him and be like, hey, is this guy, should we endorse him? No. And there you go. Every Republican candidate has to pretty much beg or bow down to Trump if they're going to take on that political party, or if they're going to take on the Republican Party to become a Republican president, because they're going to need his endorsement, especially now that he installed his daughter-in-law into the RNC, which pretty much gives out all the money for the Republican parties, candidates, I should say. So they're going to have to bow down to him and be like, oh, yes, Trump, I love your policy. I love you, blah, 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 in order to get anywhere near being president, a Republican president of the United States. So it's going to be rough. Now, all the other little smaller elections, like for governor, congressman, local, state, and senate, you don't really need his blessing or anything like that. Maybe acknowledge him if you're a Republican. But if you are trying to run for like the big leagues, yeah, you're definitely going to have. So we're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to bring the last story I want to talk to you about, the struggle bus, the housing, and how millennials not really looking forward to buying houses. Right now, we're just trying to, all that coming up next. As much as we young people want to buy a house, we can't because we're broke and we're struggling. Honestly, you're living paycheck to paycheck and you're trying to just survive. Sorry about that. My computer decided to try and die. Anyways, so we're just trying to survive. Like, the housing market just isn't. So CNN posted a article. I'm going to try and go through it really quickly because we are at 40 minutes. And I know these episodes. Oh, anyways. Americans are living through the toughest housing market in a generation, and for some young people, the American dream of owning a home is slipping away. Mortgage rates surged in recent years, hitting the highest levels in more than 2 decades last fall. While rates have come down significantly since then, home prices remain painfully elevated, and a limited inventory of housing is still failing to keep up with demand. Such conditions mean that housing has become woefully unaffordable. Falling mortgage rates in recent weeks have helped, but home prices could remain sticky, according to economics. It's still a cruddy time to be hunting for a home, but it's even worse for young, first time buyers who need to save up a down payment and build up their credit score while during a time when baby boomers are refusing to part with their big home. The situation isn't a whole lot better for renters, with rent barely coming down from record highs and half tenants in the market saying they can't even afford their payments. The uneasiness over Americans' affordability crisis is captured clearly in surveys and polls. Data that outlines the sentiment specifically among young people is limited. CNN spoke with some young Americans about their thoughts on the current state of the U.S. housing market and their plans for the future. Surviving is priority, not saving a down payment or even kids. Brandy Grant, 35, lives in San Francisco Bay Area, California. No wonder why. One of the most expensive housing markets in the country. Despite a difficult upbringing, she pushed herself to graduate from college with a bachelor's degree and is now making $76,000 a year as a senior consultant for an academic publishing company. But she says she is barely making ends meet. After paying her bills each month, including a $500 to chip away at more than $90,000 in student debt, Grant says she doesn't even have enough to save for a deposit. Excuse me. She goes on to say, I'm real. real tired. She said, having kids will never be on the table. I haven't even put a cent in my retirement. So there is just zero hope for me ever to own a home. The minimum down deposit required to purchase a home depends on various factors, such as the type of mortgage being taken out, the prospective home buyer's credit score, and the property's asking price. The conventional wisdom is that hopeful buyers could save to put about 20% down before shopping around. Doing this is a pipe dream for those who can't even save to begin with. I can't even save barely $200 a paycheck, and you want me to put 20% down on a house? I and this is a side note. I just recently got a car because, moving from one state to the other, I didn't want to have to do all the traveling. But I had to put a significant amount of money down for a car. Like, right now it's standard to put down on a car is like 2,500. That's not easy to just come up with or to look at your bank account and be like, "Oh yeah, I got money." And then you're like, "Oh, I got to put that 2,500 down on a car." It's not easy, and it just makes struggling a lot harder. Yeah. But the typical down payment for a first-time home buyer is usually much less, 6% last year, according to the National Association of Realtors. A government-backed Federal Housing Administration loan required a down payment as little as 3.5%, but even saving up that much can be done. It's taken 9 years for a typical home buyer to save up the median down payment on a home with a median value of the United States, according to Zillow. Building a down payment as has been difficult for Ross Burden, a 26-year-old case manager living in St. Louis, Missouri, with his wife. That's mostly due to a combination of how expensive his rent is and their costly medical, which eat up a significant portion of the couple's monthly budget. Their current financial situations mean having kids anytime soon is out of the question. I generally haven't even been able to save money over the past year. Burden said, I don't think that buying a house is super realistic for me, even in the next couple of years. So I'm not really thinking about that right now. And if me and my wife were to have children, we would definitely want to be financially comfortable or capable of doing so. So also don't see in that mistake, 'cause children are expensive. And it's almost like you're choosing children or a house, children or a house. You're not gonna be able to afford both. I mean, children itself with cribs, Pampers, doctors, all this other crap that you have to do, especially if you're working. Now, you have to change your work schedule, you have to take them to daycare or get a nanny or have family, and now you might be working less than what you usually are, and then it still doesn't stop your daily bills. Being an adult is not easy. You have a couple options: staying with your parents or leaving the country. For some, living with parents is the best option. And that certainly seems to be the case nowadays with housing affordability out of reach for many young people. More than half of US adults between 18 and 24 live with their parents in 2023. That's been the reality for Corey Griffiths, who's 24, who lives with his parents' home in Portland, Oregon. He graduated with a master's degree in history last year from Minnesota State University, but said he hasn't had any luck finding a job. Aside from not having the financial stability of full-time employment just yet, he said he doesn't find it possible to own a home someday unless he finds a first. Having two incomes stem does a lot for you, and I can't imagine owning a home until I've partnered with somebody, Griffin says. The housing market is not a single person market. What typically happens when a regional housing market becomes too unaffordable is that people without the means simply move elsewhere cheaper, such as the suburbs, an hour away, for example. A less common option is moving to a completely different country. Shaham, 37, is a naturalized US citizen who came to the country from Mexico as a child back in the 1980s. He currently works at a hotel in Santa Fe, New Mexico, the most expensive market in the state, living in a rental single family home with his sister and her three daughters, I should say. Aguilar said that he doesn't think owning a home in Santa Fe is a reality in the next 10 years, but that moving to Merida, Mexico sometime in 2025 to start a laundromat business with his partner, who is currently working in Colorado, would probably be a much better. Washers and dryers are not that expensive in Mexico, and we already looked at the price to start a laundromat, which would be about $10,000, Aguilar said. I can take that money to open a business over there. Over here, that's not even enough for a down payment. High mortgage rates are a big reason why some feel so dismayed with America's housing market, but there's been some good news lately. Federal Reserve has signaled that it would soon cut interest rates now that decade high inflation has eased off. Such a move will affect the average 30-year fixed mortgage rates, though economists said that they doubt rates will fall below 6% this year. Homeowners have told us repeatedly as of late that high mortgage rates are the top reason why it's both a bad time to buy and sell a home. And so a more positive mortgage rate outlook more incentivize some to list their homes for sale, helping increase the supply of existing homes in a new year. Still, affordability takes into account mortgage rates, family income, single family homes, which remains a vesting pain point. The 2023 median home sale price was about $389,800. According to NRA, that's up about 1% from 2022. Lower mortgage rates would improve affordability, but better zoning laws could also have a more durable impact. The sustainability solution to make it easier to build houses, that way we can actually start heading to the right direction with affordability and have to be sustainable and not just a short-term interest rate. Well, Feather's tips for for first-time home buyers is keep saving this year for when housing conditions they really do improve in 2025. Invest more money into an index fund since the stock market is currently going strong. Be realistic about the neighborhoods you should live in and consider other more affordable housing options such a condo or town. They also say that newly constructed homes may be a viable option for first-time buyers because some home builders proposing new incentives toward closing costs, such as a two-in-one buy down, which is a type of financing that offers interest rates for the first 2 years before it rises to regular permanent rates. She also said that those deals are becoming more common in cities that have ramped up residential construction in recent years, such as Minneapolis, sorry, Houston, Dallas, Austin, Texas, Tampa, Jacksonville, Orlando, Florida, Atlanta, and Phoenix. Young first-time home buyers usually don't know about that because there isn't one place where you can go and see all the incentives. So approaching the builders directly to make a deal, it- it- I can tell you, Arizona, people are coming out here. There's so much desert, so like there's so many places to live. The further you get away from the city of Phoenix, the cheaper it becomes. I know I have some family that are in like Casadona. They're like literally, they're in the middle of nowhere, but an amazing mountain view. I even think Flagstaff is another city that I've been through. Oh my god, it's gorgeous. I bet the housing is cheaper because you're literally like 2 hours away from civilization. They've built their own town. They have a Walmart and whatever like that. But like from the main city like Phoenix, it's about a 2 hour. So I think the further you get away from cities, the cheaper housing could be. Like I said, Arizona's a desert. Nevada's a really good place. It, so, but as they said in the article, it's just building houses. Like there's not a lot of houses that are built, which is why the housing prices are so extreme. Like if we had a lot more houses, you know, I think we could make a pretty good impact. But we are probably at like 50 minutes now of this podcast. So I just want to tell you all thank you so much for listening to the show. Hope now that I'm back into the groove of doing these shows, I can keep up to date on the events that are going on, whether it's presidential, whether it's just another topic that we kind of need to talk more about. I really know when that. Who cares? You'll be right here listening to the show. Guess what, guys? We're almost to 250 listens on this podcast. So just start sharing it with your friends, family, everyone. 250. It may not seem like a lot, but it's a milestone. And I will, when we hit it, I'll have a cupcake for our next episode. Until then, thank you for coming to the show. Be kind, be safe, smart, do something different. Enjoy your mental health. Before we leave, let's talk about mental health. Enjoy your mental health. Do not let these jobs dictate how you will spend your mental health, okay? Because some of these jobs, and I'm not going to name them, but some of them are really daunting on your mental. So you take a day off, 2 or 3 if you can financially afford it, and do you. Do something you love to do, whether that's staying home playing video games, whether that's you being your own boss and doing Lyft on the side. Let me tell you, don't let anyone overstress you this year, and don't let these jobs overstress you, because in theory, there's so many other jobs. I'm not saying quit your job, but you have to understand you need a work-life balance. And if you don't have that, you're going to start seeing that, man, I'm working my ass off and I'm not getting anything in return. So take care of your mental health.